94 years, nearly a century on this earth. I've buried 3 presidents, survived 2 recessions, and watched the world transform in ways I never could have imagined as a young girl. My name is Eleanor Walsh, and I'm here to tell you that almost everything you think matters doesn't. I know that sounds harsh, maybe even cynical, but hear me out, because I spent the first 60 years of my life chasing all the wrong things. And it wasn't until I lost everything that I finally understood what actually mattered. You think money matters. You think success matters. You think the house, the car, the career, the perfect body, the Instagram followers. You think all of that matters. It doesn't. I know because I had it all. And I can tell you from experience, from 94 years of living and learning and losing, none of it matters the way you think it does. Let me take you back. 1955. I was 25 years old, fresh off my wedding to Thomas Walsh, tall, handsome, ambitious Tom. He worked for General Electric, climbing that corporate ladder with determination I'd never seen before. We had the American dream, the house in Westchester with the white picket fence, 2 cars in the driveway, 3 beautiful children, Margaret, James, and little Susan. I wore pearls to the grocery store. I hosted dinner parties. I kept an immaculate home. From the outside, we were perfect, the envy of the neighborhood. But here's what nobody saw. Tom worked 70 hours a week. When he came home, he was exhausted, distant. We'd sit across from each other at dinner and have nothing to say. The kids would try to tell him about their day, and he'd nod without really listening, his mind still at the office. I threw myself into perfection. If I couldn't have connection, I'd have control. My house was spotless. My children were well-dressed, well-behaved. My garden was the talk of the neighborhood. I won awards at the church bake sale, and I was desperately, achingly lonely. But I told myself this was normal. This was what marriage looked like. This was what success looked like. You sacrifice connection for security. You trade intimacy for stability. The years passed. The kids grew up. Margaret went to Vassar, James to Princeton, Susan to Smith. We'd done it. We'd raised successful children. We'd built wealth. We'd achieved the dream. And the house felt empty, tomb-like. Tom retired at 65. We'd been married 40 years at that point. And suddenly we were home together all day, every day. And we realized we were strangers. We'd spent 4 decades living parallel lives under the same roof. We tried. We really did. We took a trip to Europe, Paris, Rome, Venice, all the places we'd talked about visiting someday, and we walked through the Louvre in silence. We ate dinner overlooking the Grand Canal with nothing to say to each other. Tom died 3 years later, heart attack. Quick, the doctor said. He didn't suffer. And you want to know the truth? The terrible, awful truth? I felt relief. And then I felt crushing guilt about that relief. I was 68 years old, a widow, alone in that big empty house. And that's when everything fell apart. Margaret called once a month, always in a hurry, always with somewhere else to be. James sent cards on holidays, but rarely visited. Susan, my baby, moved to California and built a life I knew nothing about. I'd spent 40 years keeping that perfect house, hosting those perfect dinners, maintaining that perfect image. And for what? My children were strangers, polite strangers who felt obligated to check in but didn't actually want to know me because they didn't know me. How could they? I'd never let them see me, the real me. I'd been so busy being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect neighbor that I'd forgotten to be a person. I sold the house, couldn't stand it anymore. All those rooms, all those memories of a life half lived. I moved to a small apartment in the city, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. And that's when my real life began, at 70 years old. I started volunteering at a community center in Harlem, teaching literacy to adults who'd never learned to read. And for the first time in my life, I felt useful, not ornamental. useful. I met Dorothy there. She was 45, raising 3 grandkids on her own, working 2 jobs, and still coming twice a week to learn to read. She had every reason to be bitter, to be angry at the world, but she laughed more than anyone I'd ever met. She'd mess up a word and just throw her head back and laugh. "We'll get it next time, Miss Eleanor," she'd say. And one day I asked her, "Dorothy, how do you do it? How do you stay so joyful when life has been so hard?" She looked at me like I'd asked the strangest question in the world. "Miss Eleanor," she said, "I got my grandbabies. I got my health. I got people who love me and people to love. What else is there? What else is there?" That question changed my life because I'd spent 70 years chasing what else? The bigger house, the nicer car, the better china, the perfect reputation. More, 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 always more. And Dorothy, who had so much less than I ever did, had figured out what I was only just beginning to understand. The things that actually matter you can't buy, you can't achieve them, you can't earn them or win them or put them on a resume. Connection matters, real, messy, imperfect connection with other human beings. Presence matters, being fully where you are with who you're with instead of always thinking about the next thing. Purpose matters, feeling like what you do makes a difference no matter how small. Joy matters, not happiness, that's fleeting, but joy. Deep, abiding joy that comes from living in alignment with who you really are. I started reaching out to my children differently, not the polite surface-level calls, real conversations. I told Margaret about my loneliness, my regrets. I told James I was sorry for being so rigid when he was growing up. I told Susan I wanted to know her, really know her. It was awkward at first. They didn't know what to do with this version of their mother, the one who admitted mistakes, the one who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. But slowly, over years, we built something real. Margaret and I talk every week now. Real talks. She tells me about her marriage struggles, her fears about aging, her dreams for the future. James brings his kids to visit, and we bake cookies and make messes and laugh. Susan and I are close now, closer than we ever were when she was young. She told me last year, "Mom, I spent my whole childhood thinking you didn't like me. You were so critical, so controlling, but now I understand you were just scared of being imperfect." She was right. I joined a writing group at 75, started putting down all these thoughts, these realizations, published a small essay in a literary journal at 78. Nothing fancy, no bestseller, but it was mine, my words, my truth. I learned to paint at 80, terrible at it, absolutely terrible, but I didn't care. I'd spent my whole life needing to be good at everything. Now I could just enjoy the process. I made real friends, not the country club friends I had before, where we compared jewelry and gossiped about neighbors. Real friends. Women who'd lived full, complicated lives, who'd made mistakes, who'd survived, who knew how to laugh at themselves. We'd meet every Tuesday for coffee. Sometimes we'd solve the world's problems. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence. And it was the most meaningful social life I'd ever had. I traveled differently too, not the luxury tours Tom and I took. I volunteered abroad, built houses in Guatemala at 82, taught English in Vietnam at 85, got food poisoning in Morocco and laughed about it later, because I finally understood that life isn't about comfort. It's about experience. It's about connection. It's about stories you'll tell later with a smile on your face. Here's what I wish I could tell my 25-year-old self. What I wish someone had told me: the perfect house doesn't matter. No one remembers how clean your floors were. They remember how welcome they felt in your home. The perfect body doesn't matter. Your body is just the vehicle. What matters is what you do with it, where you go, who you hold, how you move through the world. The career success doesn't matter as much as you think. Yes, financial security matters, but once you have enough, more doesn't make you happier. It just gives you bigger problems. What people think of you doesn't matter at all. They're all too worried about what you think of them to spend much time thinking about you anyway. Your reputation doesn't matter. You can spend your whole life protecting your image, and when you die, people will remember you how they want to remember you regardless. Here's what actually matters: the people you love and who love you back. Not obligatory love, not transactional love, real, choose you every day love. The moments when you're fully present, the sunset you actually stop to watch, the conversation where you weren't thinking about what to say next, the meal you tasted instead of photographed, the times you were brave, when you said the hard thing, when you did the scary thing, when you chose authenticity over approval, the difference you made. And it doesn't have to be big, it can be small. Teaching one person to read, making one person laugh, showing up for one person when they needed you, the things you created, not for money or recognition, just because they wanted to exist and you brought them into the world, the adventures you took, the risks you chose, the times you said yes when it would have been easier to say no. I'm 94 years old. I have maybe 5 years left if I'm lucky, maybe less. And I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of what comes next. Because I finally lived, not the life I was supposed to live, not the life that looked good from the outside, but my life. Messy, imperfect, real. I wasted 60 years. But I've made the most of these last 34. And if I could go back, if I could whisper in the ear of that 25-year-old bride in her perfect house with her perfect pearls, I'd tell her to make a mess. I'd tell her to be honest. I'd tell her to stop performing and start living. I'd tell her that the things she thinks matter are just distractions from the things that actually do. I'd tell her that life is shorter than you think and longer than you imagine, and you don't get a practice round. I'd tell her to love hard, to forgive quickly, to laugh often, to be present, to be brave. I'd tell her that perfection is a prison and authenticity is freedom. I'd tell her that 70 years from now she won't remember the spotless floors or the impressive dinner parties. She'll remember the moment her daughter crawled into her lap and she actually put down what she was doing and held her. She'll remember the conversations that lasted till 3 a.m., the trips that didn't go as planned, the time she was vulnerable and someone met her there. That's what matters: connection, presence, purpose, joy, love. Everything else is just noise. I'm 94 years old, and I finally figured it out. Don't take as long as I did. Your life is happening right now, not someday. Not when you achieve the next goal or reach the next milestone. Right now. So stop chasing what doesn't matter and start living what does.